Story 1. Licked the lid of my yogurt, then threw the full yogurt pot in the bin with the spoon inside. Story 2. Put a wad of tissues in the laundry basket and threw my socks into the toilet. Story 3. I put a scoop of cat food in the washing machine drawer once. Story 4. I put a dog treat in my mouth and gave my dog my popsicle. She was thrilled. Story 5. Tried to play Nintendo Wii with my glass full of water and had the controller in the wrong hand. Story 6. I was drinking a hot cup of coffee on the back porch while throwing a ball for my dog. To be fair, it was around 4 a.m., and the dog was not hurt, but my favorite mug got knocked over, and the tree got some dirty coffee water. Story 7. When I am snapping the ends off the green beans, sometimes I throw the bean in the trash and the end in the bowl. Not too funny, but at least it is true. Story 8. Phone in one hand, open Pepsi bottle in the other. Threw the wrong one on my bed. Story 9. It is becoming clear to me from this discussion that humans holding a cup in one hand and anything in the other hand is a recipe for disaster. Story 10. I have put the house phone in the refrigerator and left the milk out more times than is healthy. The refrigerator is now the default first place I look if the phone is not on its cradle. Story 11. When I was 10, I was watching television with the remote in one hand and a cup of hot tea in the other. My dad came in and asked for the remote. Instead of handing it to him, I threw my cup of tea, and it spilled all over him. The next morning, his chest and legs were red. Story 12. A couple of minutes ago, I unwrapped a stick of chewing gum, placed the wrapper in my mouth, and threw the gum in the trash. Story 13. I had a cup of coffee and a small single-serve container of coffee creamer. I opened the creamer container, poured its contents into the trash, and then dropped the empty container into my coffee. Story 14. Tried to put a Mars and Murray candy in my ear and my Samsung Galaxy Buds in my mouth. Story 15. I was writing while drinking Coca-Cola. I accidentally stabbed myself in the face with a pencil. Story 16. I once picked up my toothbrush and then, instead of picking up toothpaste, I picked up a tube of cortisone. Luckily, I caught myself. I also once picked up a razor instead of a toothbrush and just stared at it. Another time, I poured water on the floor instead of in the sink. Imagine someone standing facing away from the sink, angling their glass of water downwards, and just staring at the stream of water hitting the floor. My mom did the same but poured the glass of water into a dog cage where my cat was resting. The cat did not move but stared at her like, "What is happening? Thank you so much for my first gold. It makes me so happy to see people thoroughly enjoy me and my mother's weird moments." Story 17. A friend of mine once put the remote control in the oven and then wondered why he found himself in the living room holding a sausage. The remote control was destroyed. It had previously spent several days in the back of a freezer because of a similar incident. Story 18. I cracked an egg, poured the egg into the trash, and put the shell into a bowl. Story 19. My husband cleans the cat litter box and puts the waste in a tied-off plastic grocery bag. He also puts his lunch in a tied-off plastic grocery bag. When he goes to work, he takes both bags outside, one to bring with him and one for the trash can. Mistakes have happened. Story 20. I was studying my notes, which were in a notebook, while also following lecture slides on my tablet. I tried zooming in on my notes. This happened many times throughout the semester. Story 21. This was my brother, but I was on the receiving end. We were at a country club for a wedding one evening, and there were various backgammon games set up. This happened so long ago I don't even remember how to play backgammon anymore. It was my brother's turn, and he was excited. So excited, he slammed his glass of bourbon down on the game board and thrust the dice cup full of dice into his mouth. It was totally worth being covered in watered-down liquor to witness such buffoonery. Story 22. Threw away $5, tried to pay at the cash register with candy wrappers. Edit. To all of you asking, my favorite candy wrapper has to be M&M. Story 23. Threw my keys into the recycling bin and attempted to start my truck with a crushed energy drink can. Story 24. Drank paint water while washing my brush in my cup of tea. 2 simultaneous mistakes. Story 25. I had a cup of coffee and a scented candle. I drank the candle. Story 26. I had a lens cleaner spray in one hand and a mouth freshener spray in the other. Guess what I did? Story 27. I dipped my chips in the water, had a little moment of self-doubt in my head, then proceeded to drink the salsa. Story 28. I had a phone book 3.5 inches thick for a class project in one hand and my hat in the other. School had just let out, and my friends distracted me. We talked. The phone book and the hat switched hands a couple of times because it was a heavy brick of paper that kids today don't know. I got distracted. The wind gusted a bit colder. I jammed my hat on my head, but it wasn't my hat. That's how I once concussed myself with the Southwestern Bell Yellow Pages. Story 29. Computer keyboard under one hand, PlayStation 4 controller in the other. Wondering why what I am typing on the computer does not show on the PlayStation 4. Story 30. I used my bare hand to pick up my dog's poop. I know my neighbor saw me as well. I just kind of played it off. Story 31. Put my box of cereal in the refrigerator and my gallon of milk on top of it. It stayed that way unnoticed for almost 24 hours. Story 32. Disposing of leftover bones into the trash and placing the plates into the sink. I grabbed the bones with my hand, tossed the plates into the trash bin, and started washing the bones before realizing what I had done. Story 33. I was holding my apartment keys in one hand and a trash bag in the other. I accidentally threw my keys into the dumpster and kept the bag. I couldn't find my spare key, and it took a week to get a new one. Story 34. Not me, but a friend of mine. I was at a party a couple of years ago, typical early adult stuff, so everyone was drunk by the end of the day. I myself can't drink, so I had a front row seat to this event. My friends were all in the same age group, newly 21-year-olds drinking their fill. You can imagine what happens later. The bathrooms start filling up with a bunch of new drinkers throwing up. My cousin and her significant other happened to be at this party. She was about ready to throw up. Her boyfriend was already taking care of her brother, who had just thrown up. I should mention that the boyfriend was also very drunk. He had a bowl in one hand, half full of the brother's vomit, and nothing in the other hand. My cousin was heaving and all the bathrooms were locked. Trash cans and sinks were free, but we were upstairs. There was no way. These three were making it down there. So the boyfriend looked at his empty hand in a drunken daze, then at the hand holding the large bowl, then at his heaving significant other who was ready to throw up. I looked at him, and I could practically see his brain trying to tell him what to do. No luck, his motor skills were impaired. In an attempt to help my cousin, he hurriedly moved his empty hand below her mouth and caught all her vomit in his palm. I watched in horror as it spilled onto the white rug of our friend's house. The boyfriend, as vomit flowed through his empty hand, stared at the other hand with the bowl and silently mouthed a curse as he slowly realized his body did not perform the way he wanted it to. It's a story we still tell to this day. Story 35. Teabag in the sink, teaspoon in the bin. It happens on an astonishingly regular basis. Story 36. Only in one hand, but I poured a drink onto myself that I was sipping through a straw. Story 37. One bag full of dog waste, one bag full of dog treats. I shoved one in my pocket. Lesson learned, use a different bag. Story 38. I have type 1 diabetes. Usually, when I prepare for an injection, I take the cap off with my teeth. Once, I took it off with my hands, somehow forgot in the brief moment I did it, and continued to prick my tongue with a sharp needle. Story 39. Funny enough, I threw my phone in the trash this morning and realized only after dumping the trash into my clothes bin. Story 40. I was making a chocolate drink, Milo, one day and I poured almost half a bottle of soy sauce into the cup, confusing it with the Milo. Story 41. I was just going for a walk with one of my daughters the other day. She stopped and picked a dandelion from someone's property. Not one of the yellow dandelions, but the white one you blow on and it sends seeds all over the place. So there she was walking along with a lollipop in one hand and a dandelion in the other. Do the math. Story 42. My friend at work was so exhausted one morning that he tried locking the employee refrigerator with his car keys. I know that is not exactly the question, but I thought it was somewhat relevant. Story 43. This is not a mixed-up hand story, but it is in the same vein. One day, after delivering an order during my former pizza delivery job, I was walking back to my car. As I walked, I held my car key between my fingers. My brain told my hand, "Okay, hand. The next thing you are going to do is insert that key into the ignition to start the car." My hand replied, "Okay, I got this." As I sat down in the car, my brain said to me, "Panhead09, you should probably take your phone out of your pocket and charge it before starting the car. The battery is getting low." I said, "That's a good idea, brain. You should pass that along to my hand." My brain responded, "I think I will do just that." So my brain relayed this message through my arm. When the message reached my elbow, my arm said, "Charging the phone. Got it. I will get this process going." My arm started moving to get my phone out of my pocket. However, my arm started moving before the message reached my hand. While my arm was excited, thinking, "That phone is going to get charged," my hand was still focused on, "Insert the key and turn on the engine. Insert the key and turn on the engine." That is how I ended up stabbing myself in the leg with my car key. Story 44. Eating a sandwich at the beach. Skipping stones. Watching the sunset and thinking about life. Throwing the sandwich into the ocean. Biting a rock. People saw. Story 45. This happened yesterday. I was blowing bubbles for my son. I was holding the bubble liquid container and a beer bottle in the same hand and repeatedly thrusting the bubble blower into the liquid. Except I did it to the beer bottle. Then I laughed and thought, what a dumb mistake. I stopped blowing bubbles, put one container in each hand, and took a big sip of bubble liquid. My 7-year-old neighbor fell off her bike laughing at me. Story 46. I had a container of curd in my left hand and a packet in my right hand. Someone asked me what time it was, and when I looked at my watch on my left hand, I spilled the curd all over myself because the lid was not tightly closed. Story 47. I was eating cereal and poured orange juice into the bowl, then filled a cup with milk. I did not realize it until after I had taken a bite. Story 48. Sat down by the ocean to smoke a joint with my friend. He was about to spark up, so I handed him a lighter. Turned out to be empty, so I gave him a second lighter. He then threw the good lighter into the ocean. I just sat there thinking, I don't know what I am more upset about. Not being able to smoke or you throwing plastic into the ocean. He was just staring out there silently, knowing he messed up twice. It was a pretty classic moment in retrospect. Story 49. Peeled the potatoes, then put the peeler in the pan with water, and threw the potato into the soapy sink water. Story 50. Finished chopping some vegetables when my careless mind caused me to cut 4 of my fingers at the same time. Story 51. I have thrown away many things and held on to the trash. Story 52. I am cross-dominant, somewhat ambidextrous but not completely. Sometimes I forget which hand I use for tasks. The other day, I tried using a knife with my right hand to slice bread, but accidentally stabbed my left hand because I am not very skilled with knives in my right hand. I was sure it was my right hand, but once I switched to my left, there was no problem. Part of me suspects that my dominant hand switches sometimes. Story 53. I had 2 cups on the table, one with goldfish crackers and the other with lemonade. I was eating and drinking while watching a video. I got absorbed in the content and ended up drinking from the goldfish cup. Before I had a chance to react, I had 4 fingers in my lemonade. Story 54. Threw a digital single-lens reflex camera on the couch instead of my jacket. The camera bounced off the cushion and hit the floor. Story 55. I use a cup as an ashtray. Smoking a cigar. Drinking scotch. Relit the cigar with a match. Dropped the match into the scotch and for 0.2 of a second, I heard sizzling and expected an explosion. My heart skipped a beat. Still drank the scotch. Story 56. I had my tarantula on my hand and a couple of Doritos in the other. I almost ate my tarantula. Story 57. I threw my wallet into the trash instead of the ice cream wrapper. Story 58. I had a friend who held a cookie in one hand and the wrapper in the other. He was hiding in the bathroom so he could have the entire cookie to himself. In a panic, he ended up shoving the wrapper into his mouth and the cookie into the toilet. Story 59. Not which hand but which child I was holding in my hands. I thought I was holding my 3-year-old at the time. I bent over to a reasonable height so she would put down her legs and stand up. I was, in fact, holding my 4 to 5-month-old. She did not extend her legs or miraculously learn to stand. So I basically dropped her from about 2 feet in the air. Story 60. If I am holding something in one hand and the lid for my water jug in the other, I almost always drop whatever item I am holding into my jug, thinking it is the lid. The lid. Story 61. My teacher in the 6th grade asked me to throw him an eraser. I threw a pair of scissors at him. He had to duck and they narrowly missed his eye. I guess I could call that payback for the time he pretended to cut my hair off and actually got some. Story 62. I used to put Vaseline under my eyes before bed. One night, I got drunk and put the vapor rub under my eyes instead of the Vaseline. They started burning. Story 63. Nothing too bad. But once I was unloading groceries into the refrigerator when I received a phone call. I put my phone in the refrigerator, closed the door, and tried to talk to a block of tofu. Story 64. I went to mail a letter while walking the dog. I couldn't immediately figure out why I was still holding the mail when I got home despite going to the mailbox. The dog waste bag was missing. Story 65. Poured milk into the bin instead of into my mug of brewing tea. Story 66. Put the small cap on the large bottle, and it drops inside the bottle. Story 67. Unwrapped a candy and threw it in the trash. After a second, realizing what I did, I threw the wrapper in the trash as well. Story 68. I once tried to start my car with a creamsicle and licked my keys. Story 69. My 3-year-old wanted me to open some candy for her. She then watched in horror as I threw the candy in the trash and gave her the empty wrapper. Story 70. Wiping my runny nose while on the toilet. Autopilot took over, and I had tissue in my hand. Edit. I accidentally wiped poo on my nose. Story 71. Eating and filling a bowl. I ended up biting a chunk out of my buddy. Story 72. While cleaning up after a party in college, I had a Coca-Cola bottle with rum and Coca-Cola, but I also picked up an old chewing tobacco spit bottle to throw it away. You know where this is going. Story 73. Removing nail polish with acetone and drinking lemonade at the same time was a strange call to poison control. Story 74. While deployed to Afghanistan, I had a radio with 2 buttons and 3 options for transmitting. Button 1 could be switched between intercom with other people I was working with to just chat, and broadcasting for operation messages. Button 2 broadcast over satellites to multiple locations, including the Pentagon. We were only supposed to use that for specific things because there was always a chance that extremely high-ranking officials would be listening to that channel. One day, we were talking over the intercom, and I called one of my teammates a derogatory name, only for him to respond, what channel did you just send that out on? I had keyed the satellite channel and broadcast to the entire world. We decided to end that conversation and never speak of it again. Story 75. Smashed my burrito into the front door while taking a big bite of my keys. Story 76. Running bar trivia. I had a microphone in one hand and a drink in the other. I proceeded to ask the next question into the cup. Story 77. I had my phone in one hand, got a water bottle out of the fridge, took a drink, and put my phone in the fridge instead of my water bottle. It took my roommate and me 2 hours before we found my phone. It was on silent too. Story 78. I was painting and also had a glass of juice. I accidentally drank paint water. Story 79. Once I was holding a face wash bottle and a shampoo bottle. Long story short, I accidentally washed my hair with face cream. Story 80. Threw my steak in the trash bin last night after removing it from a vacuum-sealed bag. Story 81. Not hands, but feet. I stepped on the brake instead of the gas. Luckily, there was no one behind me. Story 82. Not me, but I read a post that someone saw another person throw his phone instead of a piece of garbage off a cliff. Oof. Story 83. threw mailbox keys in the garbage bin, and took the garbage can to the mailbox before realizing my mistake. Story 84. Ironing clothes. I picked up the iron to answer an incoming call during the 1990s. Story 85. I took a drink from my Chew Spit bottle instead of my Mountain Dew. Story 86. I walked into my room with a cup of milk in one hand and my phone in the other. Someone said something to me right before I closed my door. I turned around without thinking and threw my cup of milk on my bed. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.